Yoni steaming, which has gained a lot of popularity online. I personally am going to be straight up with you all. I've not tried it. I understand and have seen what it looks like, but I wanted to kind of bring an expert in there as I'm kind of like, should I do it? Should I not do it? And what are those benefits? So can you give me a little bit of like how you serve your clients using Yoni steaming?
Yeah, so huge topic for me. So it's always a little hard to kind of pare down these big overarching things that I work on every day into like small little snippets so people can really understand, but I'll do my best. So I'll start with the term yoni. So it's a Sanskrit word that means the entire female reproductive system. It kind of loosely translates to that. So it includes the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, the vagina, of course. So some people call it vaginal steaming or pelvic steaming, but I prefer the term yoni steaming, which I think it's kind of like a little bit of a buzz thing nowadays. But when I was first learning it, it definitely was not, and people didn't know what a yoni was. So just to throw that out there, that's why I like to use that term, is because it encompasses the entire area that we're working on. And so basically what it is sitting over a pot of some sort of clean water source and an herbal blend. And so you boil them and then you sit over the steam as it's rising up. So you wait for a period of time for it to cool down enough so that it's comfortable to sit over. It should be always a comfortable temperature, sort of more in the realm of like a shower or a facial. It shouldn't be burning or hurting you at all. I have a personal story about that. But that's one of the things that people that are anti-yoni steaming will be like, oh, women are going to be burning their vaginas and it's such a sensitive area. And that's true. You definitely really need to be careful, but it's the same as like eating food that's hot. You just like wait for it to cool down so then you can eat it.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah. So it does. I mean, women are smart. We are capable and we can steam our yonis safely. So there are so many things that you can use steaming for. So I'll just kind of talk about some of the ones that I work with the most. One of the ones I work with the most is fertility. And there isn't like a fertility steaming plan in particular. It's the same with acupuncture and with Chinese herbs and everything that I do. There isn't like a fertility protocol, but you're basically just working on that individual woman's cycle issues or whatever other issues are coming up in their system. That's what you're working on. And then that in and of itself enhances their fertility because you're correcting these imbalances basically. So I work a lot with fertility, period pain, a ton. It's very, very, very helpful for that. Cysts, fibroids, endometriosis, pain with sex, which I have personal experience with, a lot of personal experience with. Unfortunately, steaming has been life-changing for me personally and for other people that I've worked with. It can also be used for labor preparation. So this is a lot of these are things that you would want to be working with somebody like me or another like yoni steam therapist. So Steamy Chick, Kelly Garza certifies a lot of us practitioners. So she's a wonderful resource. Maybe you could link her website, Steamy Chick. I think it's steamychick.institute now. It used to be steamychick.com. But yeah, so you'd really want to be working with a practitioner for labor preparation in particular. That's a more nuanced one because there is no steaming during pregnancy usually, but at the end of pregnancy at a certain week mark, you can start steaming, but you would want to make sure you're using the right herbs and doing it for the right amount of time with the right amount of the correct temperature, essentially. And then also in the postpartum phase, that's where it's most commonly used sort of around the world, is in the postpartum phase to make sure that everything is fully cleared out. So there is a period of time where your body is passing what's called the lochia, which is like tissue and blood that's left over after childbirth. And that's normal and natural and supposed to be happening. So we're not trying to do anything about that other than just like make sure it clears out efficiently. Same thing as with the period, just wanting to make sure it clears out efficiently. And then it can also be used in postmenopausal phase just sort of to help women reconnect with their feminine energy if they feel a little disconnected from that in the absence of their cycles. And then also can help with vaginal dryness and infections. I think those are kind of like the big ones.
Yeah, this is so informative. I love it.
One of the other things I want to mention, since I just kind of talked about the period and postpartum, in the postpartum phase is the only time that you can steam when you're having some bleeding in that moment. Normally you do not steam during the period.
So. Okay. Yeah. That was kind of like the question I was asking, because I wanted to kind of connect the dots for our listeners too, especially my community where, you know, I use yin yoga in the fertility space. And to be kind of clinical with it for a moment, it's really about like your parasympathetic nervous system and your, you know, fight or flight mode, and how do we drop into that rest and digest. And so my question for you is, like, is the steam relaxing and it's kind of doing some of that on sensitive parts, or is it really like the herbal compounds and how you're making blends that also do that?
Yeah, it's a combination of those two things. I mean, I do find steaming to be really relaxing, and it's a similar sensation to like receiving acupuncture or doing yoga, of that like sort of like whole body, like feeling like nourished and calm and cozy. And I think it does depend on what you do during your steam too. I've historically told people you could do whatever, like you can scroll your phone or watch TV or, you know, do whatever you want. And I do still feel that way. I think it's important to get the steam in whatever way that you can. But I do think it feels really different if you do sort of like a meditation or kind of take that steaming time and make it more of like a meditative dropping in process rather than just scrolling your phone. But yeah.
Okay. So that leads me to my next question. How long am I doing this?
Yeah. So it depends on what your goals are and a lot of other factors as well. And I do have a full course where I talk about like some of the main considerations and timing of things. So if you're interested, we can link that maybe. And I do have an ebook too, that is what I will be sharing for free for everybody. Yeah. And there's a little bit of this information in there too. But generally it's from 10 to 45 minutes, and it really depends on the person, how long you would be doing it for. So 10-minute steam would be, if it's your first time, I recommend starting with 10 minutes just to see how your body responds. And if you have any like negative effects or anything like that, which I haven't had anybody have a negative effect personally, but I know that it can happen. I've heard anecdotally, other people have had that experience. Just feeling kind of like dizzy or nauseous or something like that, which that can happen with any kind of energy work too, like acupuncture or yoga. So yeah, 10 minutes steam for first time. If you have an IUD, only 10 minutes. If you have an active infection, only 10 minutes. That's something that you would also want to be working with a practitioner. If you have an infection, making sure that you're using the right herbs, for that one in particular. If you are prone to like heavier bleeding, then 10 minutes would be kind of a good place to start and just kind of see how that impacts your bleeding in the future for that cycle. Or if you have mid-cycle bleeding, if it makes you have more mid-cycle bleeding and things like that. And then for a 45-minute steam would be most appropriate for people that have a lot of stagnation or stuckness. So that would show up as like really dark clotted blood during the period, or if they have cysts, fibroids, endometriosis, or really severe period pain. Or if you just like steaming, then you can also do a longer steam just because you like it and it feels good. So as long as you don't have any of the other issues, that would make you only appropriate for a 10-minute steam. And then you can do it as frequently as you want. Some people, I recommend for them to do it every single day if they're able to. Most people don't have the time in their life. I went through, because I'm always experimenting on myself. Before I got pregnant, I was steaming every single day just because I liked it. And I was just using dried rose petals, and it just smelled good and it felt really soothing and was connecting me to my feminine energy every day. I would only do 10 minutes at a time because that was kind of what felt right to me at the time. But yeah, so you can do it as frequently as you want, but you could also just do it weekly. And there are different protocols for it's certain things, like if you have shorter or longer cycles, if you have painful periods, cyst, fibroid, like there's all these different protocols, which is where a Yoni steam therapist comes in, is to like help you identify like the best protocol for you. But if you don't have any specific issues, then you can just do like weekly or at the new and the full moon, or just at the end of your period, for example. Those are kind of some more like basic times that you could do if you don't have any real issues.
Yeah, I think that's awesome to kind of share with people that it can be something you're trying, and like, pretty safe in that context, and that there are people out here that you can ask your questions if you have some of those preconditions that Holly just mentioned. And I think what I want my audience to really download through this is that your meditation practice doesn't have to be you in the perfectly seated position on a hard stump of wood, right? Like, as we come into accessing energy, I get that a lot from some of those my clients that are maybe in breakthrough or opening up to their energetic side, or how to find more peace in their life. And meditation doesn't have to look a certain way, and this is a great way where if you're curious, and you want to feel good, and you're looking for some of that feminine boosting self-care, this is a great balance to that run schedule you're already really good at, or pushing yourself and going in and out of your car all the time. It's like, come home and take some of those restful, recharged breaths for yourself. So I love that. I want to talk about like what I've heard online, and again, I haven't tried it, and it's not because I don't have a bowl and warm water and rose petals in my house. I just probably don't have the time either. And like, I'm sitting here thinking about doing it, and I'm already having like, wow, that would be such a benefit to me. And maybe my meditation practice is just like already there. I can like envision how I would be feeling and like take myself into it. But I think I've heard a lot of things about, your vaginal pH. I actually have, a product line where we can test like what's going on in there if people have chronic UTIs, or I don't even know if it's connected necessarily to fertility, but it makes sense to me physiologically that some of that stuff's going on as a nutritionist. But tell me about what you've heard in that territory. I know you talked to other people about this and are really an advocate for being a Yoni specialist.
Yeah. So I have personally never tested the pH of my vagina. You mentioned, we talked a little bit about this in the pre-chat, and you mentioned that like testing it, and what a cool experiment that would be to like do steaming and use different herbs and see how it affects it. So I did have a gynecologist say to me at some point that it has the potential to mess up the pH of your vagina, but she didn't really say anything like what that would cause, or, like I didn't have any infections. I'm not somebody that's prone to infections. And I've been steaming I first found Kelly's work in 2016, and I've been steaming very regularly ever since then. So that's been 6 years now that I've been steaming. Other than when I was pregnant, I wasn't steaming, but other than that, I've been steaming at least weekly, sometimes way more than that. And I don't have any issues with the pH of my vagina in terms of symptoms. So I don't know like how, like what the issue would be exactly of it messing the pH up, other than having infections, which I don't personally experience. And I've not heard any of my clients that I've worked with ever have an issue after steam. So I would just be curious to know, for people that are saying that, like, what is the concern exactly? And pH really matters in terms of fertility, because during the infertile phases of our cycle, the vagina is naturally acidic. But then when we're producing cervical mucus, it becomes alkaline. And the purpose of that is to keep sperm alive, which is also alkaline. So it makes your vagina a hospitable environment for sperm to stay for a little while during your fertile window, basically, and then to potentially fertilize the egg if that's what you're going for. And this is not like, even for people that are not wanting to conceive either like in this moment or maybe ever, that having that cascade of like having your vagina be acidic and then going into an alkaline state, like that's just part of being healthy, that you're producing cervical mucus and then, you know, you go through a phase where you're not. So in that context, I do think that the pH of the vagina would be really important to consider. But as somebody that has conceived naturally, it didn't do anything to if anything, it makes me create more cervical mucus, especially if I'm steaming around the ovulation time. So that's what I've seen in my work with other women. That's what I've experienced in my body personally. So, but like I said, it would be an interesting experiment to see, like, what does it actually do to the pH? Is this just like a theoretical, I think that could mess up the pH because I don't know about it. And I mean, I've been in holistic healthcare for over 10 years. So I'm so used to doctors thinking that what I'm doing is weird or not knowing about it. Like the Chinese herbs that I prescribe also, it's just like in the context of fertility, they're just like, oh no, don't take those because we don't know what that is. But I mean, you don't know what it is, and it can be really, really helpful. So yeah, I think that if it's based on like actual evidence and causing problems, if somebody is steaming and getting chronic infections and they notice that it's happening after they're steaming, then steaming is not appropriate for them. I mean, it could be related to something else too, but
yeah, and that was so I won't open up this can of worms too big, right? But what I do want to know is, right, like the whole theme of anything that you're watching and as my audience is equip your mind and feel your body. And I want you educated and advocating for what you understand and find the evidence and find the clinical research, but then also like fueling your body. You know, you might have a completely processed, very acidic diet and are suffering from heartburn and have systemic pH problems, in my opinion, that yes, you'd come to a nutritionist and talk about. And like your mucus down there is only one piece of that puzzle and a byproduct of the rest of your pH imbalances or not, or antibiotics realms and things like that. So I think just remembering that holistically, which is just the interconnections of things, not like holism, which I think a lot of people mix up holistic healthcare with, in my opinion, that we're just like looking how body systems interact, right? How you interact with yourself and the people around you. And so, yeah, thank you for that mic drop moment, Holly, because I think we just all need to be a little bit more conscious of like, yeah, this is my body and I want to try it or I don't. And if I keep getting sick, like, why are we doing it?
Then stop. Yeah.
So your freebie, you said you were going to introduce us to the ebook, and that's specifically on Yoni steaming. I want to ask too, like, can you give me just kind of a context? I know you said rose petals, but like some of the different kinds of herbs, I know that maybe a therapist would like prescribe a specific thing, but are like there different features if anybody does come across that, like on different kinds of herbs you're putting in them?
Yeah, so I have 6 different herb blends that I have on my shop on my website. So it's rosebudwellness.com/shop. And there's a ton of information on there about all of the different blends and like how I've created them. But essentially what you're looking for in an herbal blend is some kind of herbs that are moving or like creating circulation. Okay. And then something that is disinfecting potentially, which that kind of gets into the pH conversation a little bit more. And then something that's more like nourishing or moisturizing, and then something that smells really yummy. And sometimes there's like a few different herbs for each of those. So those are like 4 different things, but there could be like 2 herbs that are doing one of those things and they have different other properties that you're also wanting to incorporate. And this just comes with being an herbalist and understanding like the different components of how herbs work and things like that. So some of my blends are Western herbs, and then some of them are Chinese herbs because I'm an acupuncturist as well. But most of the information that's available about steaming specifically is Western herbs. So adding the Chinese herbs has kind of just been like my own sort of like theoretical knowledge about them and just trying them on myself. And so like the ratios of the different properties of the herbs are kind of what you're tweaking to make the different formulas. So there's some overlap, like a lot of my blends have rose petals in them. And partially that's because Rosebud Wellness is, you know, my business name, and I love roses and they smell amazing. They're also like a really have a strong like feminine resonance. And so it's partially for that. And they're also really moisturizing, circulating. So they have kind of a lot of the properties that we're looking for in a blend anyway. But one thing I'll say too about the disinfecting herbs, you have to kind of always balance. Disinfecting herbs can be kind of drying. So you want to balance that with some moisturizing herbs as well. So it might not make sense, like what the different ratios of the herbs that are in there, other than if you kind of know how they work together. So there's tons of people, like if you look on Etsy, there are so many different people that are making Yoni steam blends, and like usually they're pretty good, like they're not super targeted for a specific thing, but they have herbs that are good to steam with, like rose petals or nettle, like things that are pretty basic, but they're not like so targeted at like working with specific issues necessarily. Or people will call them like a fertility blend. And I always kind of caution against that, because I don't want, like, the false advertising thing kind of is a little irritating to me, because I like trying to conceive is such a vulnerable time that I don't ever want somebody to be like, oh, I'm just going to like buy this thing and I'm going to get pregnant because I'm doing that. It is, as you mentioned, a holistic experience where there's maybe a lot of different things that you'll be wanting to work on. I don't view steaming as like you have all these hormonal issues and all you have to do is steam your vagina and they're going to go away, or you can't get pregnant and all you have to do is steam your vagina and you'll get pregnant. For some people, maybe that is the case, but not usually. Usually it's like a whole system approach, like you mentioned before.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for being very clear.
Yeah.
Which I think, hopefully brings joy to some other people, because
totally,
being somebody who's in that, pre-planning, and the more information I get, right, you guys are following me on kind of my women's health journey. To me, the steaming can be that nourishing place. I think that I powered through most of my 20s, to be totally honest with you, and didn't have that like vulnerability, like you were saying, or that kind of self intimacy. Yes, I had, and I hope every woman, if you're listening, no matter what your age is, you're doing some of those practices and you're saying kind thoughts to yourself. But again, like it's just that, other situation where if you can't sit still on a block and meditate like the people in the caves did, then like let's try this and be excited about it. And so I'm really happy that like, your story is now a piece of the Fireway Wellness community, and we can keep talking about this. I have more questions, but we're gonna like keep it simple here. So in the ebook, I hope you go underneath this interview and download it. It's going to connect you to Rosebud Wellness too, so maybe you can go and try some of those steam kits. Maybe we'll put a holiday box together sometime in the future, and let people kind of share them as well. Do you have any last thoughts, Holly?
Well, one other thing, I don't know how many like where exactly this is going to be, like what platform, but if you could also link I have a YouTube video where I talk about, it's some people like to have a book and other people like to have a video. And so the video just kind of outlines exactly how to set it up. And so could be a really great way for people to kind of get started if they're feeling overwhelmed by like, what do I need to get? And how exactly should I set it up? Like there's a lot of different ways that you can set it up without a lot of materials. And that's what that video talks about. So if we could link that too, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Check out that video since it sounds like we're going to link it. Yeah.
Definitely. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Holly, thank you so much for your wisdom, and being vulnerable and sharing a little bit about your story with your fertility. You're definitely one of the people in my corner as I kind of step into what's next in my life, so that I can go do kiddo drop-offs and pickups and figure out my business and all the things.
Totally.
So thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.